Okay, welcome to the show, The California Curse. This is something that's always fascinated me. Let's start off by saying I don't think I ever visited California except in the womb. For some reason, my mother was out there, pregnant with me, and she went to a Rolling Stones concert in Anaheim. I think she even visited Disneyland with me in the womb. I never got to see it, of course. Things just, I guess, don't pan out for me as a human being. Anyway, spent most of my time in the East, or maybe in the Central Time Zone in Tennessee. That was Central Time for some reason. Probably right on the border there, I guess. So if it was 10 o'clock here, it was probably 9 o'clock there. A lot of friends, though, move out to California, and a lot of colleagues and coworkers and people like that. A lot of people come out to New York to become actors, right? They study acting. They go to quote-unquote acting schools, which really, I think acting is kind of a natural ability that people should have. And if there's anything to learn from instruction, it would be maybe subtle nuances, little idiosyncrasies, little quirks, things in your performance, things that are going to sell you or something like that. But mainly I think the people out there that might be mentors should be the people trying to find you jobs, because that's the actual difficulty in acting, is not necessarily acting, but finding jobs, getting an agent, things like that. So after their time in New York, they go out to California and try to make their way, try to strike and grab their fortune like miners or something. And then more often than not, they fail at that. It doesn't work. Some people I know went out there to start families, to get married, have children, things like that, become adults in some capacity, or as much as you can become an adult these days, because I think everybody's sort of infantilized, so therefore we become children. But there's something seriously wrong with California. Really. I mean, like, in a terrible kind of chaotic, apocalyptic, end of the world way, that because it seems like so many terrible things happen out there, and there's like, they have their own set of politics, their own set of rules, that say they get to do or behave in a way that other people are not permitted. So they're going to behave in that way. First thing I wanted to talk about, I guess, was the extremely high property values. This is something that I don't understand, because California is prone to earthquakes, so the land must separate every once in a while. So your values are going to shift as the plates under your feet do, plate tectonics and all that. You have high property values and low income. I mean, like, very low, considering. I wanted to bring up two cases of two cities, San Diego and San Francisco, and to a lesser extent, Los Angeles. You have people that are employed who simply not afford to live there. So they set up tent cities. I think they called them Obama camps for a little while. They tried to. But the problem is, every time you ever criticized Obama, you were a racist. You can't criticize him based on his own terms. It's always got to be, apparently, because he's black, allegedly. Any kind of criticism leveled against him would be considered racism. So it's really hard for people to, I mean, it's like the only people who were absolutely fearless in criticizing Obama were black people, and there were plenty of them doing that. So in San Francisco and in San Diego, and to a lesser extent Los Angeles, you have what is essentially a hepatitis outbreak and an E. coli outbreak. Now these are what I like to affectionately refer to as shit-borne diseases. And the reason for that is because you have a homeless epidemic. And what's more, San Francisco, a city like San Francisco, has taken a proactive measure of removing porta potties, because apparently they're an eyesore. I mean, if you're gonna have a place you got to have a place to poop, you're gonna have a porta potty there, right? Especially if you don't have any available public restrooms. So you take the porta potties away, and then the homeless people wind up defecating on the street. So you go there, I mean, like, you're warned ahead of time the first thing, it's like you're going to go visit your friend. And your friend would say, wait a minute, before you come, here's the map. And they send you a map. It kind of looks like a Google map, but it's loaded with little shit emoticons. It's called a shit map, basically, or a poop map if you want to be polite, in polite company. It tells you all the places not to go should you go to San Francisco. My wife had to go to Palo Alto, which is a little more inland from San Francisco, but it's near, I guess, the Berkeley area, that kind of place, but it's more inland. So she didn't have to worry about that. Palo Alto is like a burgeoning development community. It's kind of like Silicon Valley in the southern part of the western side of the country. So she didn't have to worry about it that much. She just stayed within their camp. I guess they have staff there to clean up all the shit. But anyway, you go to San Francisco, you got to look at the shit map to make sure. Most of the areas are by the bridge. Most of the areas are under the freeway areas, where a lot of the tent cities are now located. And I want to again remind people, they're homeless because they can't afford the property. They can't afford rent. They can't even afford rent. Rent in San Francisco, you're looking at between $3,000 and $5,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. And they've created the perfect storm, the perfect shitstorm situation, because you don't have people washing their hands, and you got a lot of people who are operating cell phones, because let's face it, California is a microcosm in many ways of the kind of arrogance that a lot of people have, especially with regard to cell phones. I'm not a person who uses cell phones. I don't have a cell phone. I've tried to use them. I really can't. I don't like the additional bill. I don't need the additional bill. I don't need the additional phone. The landline works just fine. It always has. And I don't need the extra headache. And then there's the charging and the apps and all that stuff, all this crazy stuff the kids seem to be into to kind of occupy themselves when they should be learning something, learning a new skill, a trade, whatever they can do. Cell phones are kind of like electronic weed. They're just there to pass the time, and they really contribute nothing to your overall inner life. So you got San Francisco, you got San Diego, you got hepatitis and E. coli. Another interesting factoid about California I just learned recently, because of a new proposition that came out, what was it, 2016? It was around the time of the election, obviously. It was a Proposition 47. Prop 47. Petty theft is now a misdemeanor, and petty theft is any theft under that is less than $1,000. I go into a house, a particularly nice house in San Francisco, if I can get in there, or I can break into somebody's car and do it. Like in a mall or something. Say somebody bought a nice 50-inch LED TV. It's in the box. I grab the box, and I don't go to jail if I'm caught. That is, if I'm caught. If I'm caught, I don't go to jail. It's just a misdemeanor. I might have to spend one night in jail, but I won't spend 6 weeks in jail. I probably won't pay a fine because it's not worth it, I guess, to them. The cops have decided they don't want to process that kind of paperwork anymore. So that's just wonderful. It's like open season for criminals. Just go there every little bit at a time, one incident per, just in case you're worried about being caught. But there's I believe one of the councilmen over there said it's a great risk-reward ratio because there's not much risk and there's much more reward. So it kind of encourages people to steal from one another, It's like, hey, I'm going to take that, whatever it is. Especially since a lot of stuff is it's very cheap now. It's very cheap. You can buy a nice assemblage or steal a nice assemblage of merchandise. As long as you keep it under $999 or something like that, you're going to be fine. As a misdemeanor, I don't even think you get a criminal record for that. So now let's add that to our shit map. We got shit maps. We got stuff you could steal. Now let's bring in the various environmental disasters that occur in California. Right now we're dealing with. You're going to be hearing this later in the future, of course, but right now they're dealing with wildfires, which are hitting the Simi Valley area, I guess. The areas around Simi Valley, which is slightly north of Los Angeles, of course, and to the to the east of the canyons. It's tearing California apart. And this happens, and this is so regular that people are just like, oh, yeah, it's a wildfire. If stuff like that happened here in New York City, we would be, oh, my God, running, screaming, panic everywhere. And wouldn't know how to deal with it. And, of course, the people out in California would be laughing at us. Like, we laugh at them every time they get a little bit of snow. Like, there was a blizzard in California back a while back. And also in Atlanta, too. I guess they're not used to blizzards in Atlanta or whatever, but these people were like, oh my God, it's a white death from the sky. What is this? What is this? And we're like, it's snow, okay? It's snow. It's wet, frozen rain, okay? And it's coming down, it's going to hit you. And then it'll melt eventually. So how do you like my voice there? But they have firestorms. It's like somebody said something to me about firestorms the other day. I was like, I almost shit my pants. Except I wasn't in San Francisco, so it wouldn't have mattered. And then you got earthquakes. San Francisco got hit by an extremely terrible earthquake in 1989. I remember that during the World Series. Oakland versus San Francisco in the World Series. Two teams right there geographically. They were right there. They were a stone's throw. Their stadiums were a stone's throw away from each other. And they're about to begin the game. And then all of a sudden, the power goes weird and funky. And then the sportscaster's like, it looks like we're having a hurricane. And then that was it. Everybody flipped out. They get scared. Okay. This is what happens also. You got your water problem. See, L.A. specifically, I'm going to mention L.A., is a city built in the desert. And the reason it's built in the desert is because it's the only place where they could put a good topography when they were planning the city. That was a valley in the desert with canyons overlooking it. So it's like this enormous pit. Think of Los Angeles as an enormous pit. So they weren't getting any water. So they had to figure out, okay, we better collect water then. So every time it rains, we'll have a nice collection system. So they came up with this thing called the Los Angeles Reservoir or the Los Angeles River, whatever you want to call it. And then, you've got a city susceptible to droughts, emergency conditions, telling people not to water their lawns. And meanwhile, celebrities are watering their lawns because, let's just face it, celebrities are just plain better than us. They're better than us, so they deserve better treatment. DiCaprio can tell you to not waste fuel because he's DiCaprio. And he can fly around in a jet if he wants because he's DiCaprio. Leo is just plain better than all of us. Anyway, getting back to the droughts. So they set up the Los Angeles Reservoir, which is most of the time empty. And then what happens is it winds up. They had a drought that lasted over a year back, a couple years back. That was one of the big pressing issues, and it continues to be, along with the pollution, the earthquakes, the wildfires, and all the shit and now petty theft to lump in on that. So what happened was after the drought was over officially when you have horrible rainstorms and flooding. So you get floods now tearing everything apart and making everything completely unusable. They set up the reservoir. It's collecting all the rain and then it overflows. So guess what they have to do? They have to drain the reservoir. They drain the reservoir down to nothing, and then we have another drought situation. And this is life in California. This is life in Los Angeles. It is life in the shit valleys of San Francisco and San Diego. It's almost like some kind of a Greek mythological curse, this town. Now, in addition to the floods, the droughts, the earthquakes, the wildfires, petty theft being a misdemeanor now, E. coli and hepatitis and the shit maps. We have taxes. They pay the highest amount of taxes. They're paying taxes, and the taxes are supposed to be going to services that would ordinarily help us deal with the idea of droughts, floods, wildfires, and possibly booking people who've stolen a little less than $1,000 worth of merchandise, or cleaning up all the crap on the street. You know, it's like things like that. You're paying taxes. Taxes are supposed to go to services. They're supposed to go to your fire department, your cops, your education system. You know, but it seems that California has its own set of priorities and politicians, and therefore those politicians are going to be making a lot of money. Even though I've looked at your average income in California, it's a little less than $40,000. It's almost very much the same as New York. And it makes no sense because it's extremely expensive to live out there. The one thing I forgot to mention about San Francisco is the Millennium Tower. This is, okay, the Millennium Tower, it was a brand new modernized tower and everything, and everybody was moving into it. Apartments, condos in the Millennium Tower can go as high as $1 million or even more in some cases. I'm sure your penthouse is going to cost more than that, right? It represents it's a breathtaking addition to the landscape of San Francisco. San Francisco, gorgeous town, by the way. Don't let the shit scare you away. Go ahead and see it. I've had many friends who've spoken of the virtues of it. It has an old world ambiance to it. It's Alfred Hitchcock once called it Paris in America. I guess he had never been to Detroit at that time. Anyway, the Millennium Tower is sinking into the Pacific Ocean. It was built, I guess, on very unsteady ground, and it is visibly, you can see that it's visibly shifting. It's visibly tilting, and people are still clamoring to spend over $1 million to move into that tower. So I guess you have collective madness involved in a lot of this, in addition to all the taxes and everything costing so much money. It's because I guess California has to pay for a lot of things. The stuff that you and I take for granted out here in the East, they have to pay for, and it's pretty bad. Next up, I think, was a late addition to the list was the Electoral College, where California is considered primarily Democrat-leaning state because they tend to always go in the blue column. And this is why you hear a lot of complaints about the Electoral College, especially when a president is elected they don't like. So you get like a Bush in there, and you get like a Bill Clinton in there. Bill Clinton, I'm sorry, not a Bill Clinton, a Donald Trump. Jeez. Sorry about that faux pas. People who talk about grabbing people by the pussy and people who actually do it, apparently, it's a different kind of a thing. So when a politician comes in that they don't like, they always say, get rid of the Electoral College. And the problem is, if you do that, then the state of California gets to decide who gets to be president, based on your popular vote, whatever it is. And I don't think people, regardless of how they may feel about certain presidents or certain political parties, want California making decisions for them. At least I like to think not. What I found interesting was, Pasadena. I don't know that whether the writers of The Big Bang Theory don't understand how economics works or how much people are earning in salary in a place like Pasadena. For those of you kids that don't know, Big Bang Theory is like this. It's a show on the television. It's on the TV lookity box, as Squidbillies like to say. And it's about a circle of friends, most of which are nerds, but also scientists. So we're not really nerds when you think about it, because whatever they've taken in their life, they looked at an episode of Star Trek and said, that's it, I want to be a scientist. That goes far beyond the definition of a nerd. That's a person who accomplished something with their life. But of course, as I say before, the infantilization of adults, specifically male adults, happens in many forms, and a lot of it is by way of comic books, products, franchises. Star Trek and Star Wars, Harry Potter, Doctor Who, the Avengers, The Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, all that stuff, dressing up in costumes, going to conventions. So all these people, the writers of this show, dislike their audience anyway. So they create unlikable or unrelatable characters in the form of these very brilliant characters who just, for some reason, I guess getting along with women is far more important than that. So let's mock them for that. Let's mock them for their ability to rationalize the idea of E equals MC squared, the theory of relativity, everyday conversations with Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and let's make fun of them for their inability to, I guess, communicate with women, as it were. Although later on in the show's run, these people do wind up getting girlfriends. Usually have to work very hard for them. There's a character on the show named Raj. Now, this happened more recently. I caught up with My Big Bang Theory with all the new episodes. Apparently, Raj is having a difficult time with money. Now, I want to put it out there first that he's an astrophysicist who works at Caltech. Okay? He is having a problem because apparently his parents are paying for him for every little luxury that he has. I don't understand this idea. His parents live in India. They're wealthy. And they're paying his way for everything. They're paying for his car. They're paying for his apartment. And I'm looking at the salary of an astrophysicist at Caltech. Usually the average salary of the astrophysicist can be about $59,000 a year. And it can go as high as $105,000 a year. $105,000 a year. Considering Raj has been there for a good number of years, I'd have to assume his salary is going to be somewhere in the mid-range between those two figures. How is he unable to afford his apartment? How is he has to, okay, he wants to make a statement. He doesn't want to take his dad's money anymore, which is honorable. And he wants to pay his own way. He wants to go to Comic-Con, of course, because, every Comic-Con is different every year. I mean, there might be new action figures this year, stuff that, he needs to fill up his non-existent apartment now with a bunch of stuff. And then he sells off a bunch of his stuff to Stuart, the owner of the comic book store, who also apparently has to move in with somebody. He has to move in with Bernadette and Howard and their baby. Anyway, Raj has to move out of his apartment after Sheldon does his finances. Sheldon, Jim Parsons' character, has to do his finances and tells him, you can't live like this anymore. I don't understand. What kind of a car does he have? What kind of an apartment does he have? He's very bad with money, but he has, he could always go back to Daddy and get more money, or he has a nice circle of friends that care about him. A lot of people don't get those opportunities. That's what I call privilege. Now, that's what I call privilege. There should be a record called, Now, That's What I Call Privilege, Volume 1 and Volume 2. That is privilege. But he can't afford. Is this a comment on California? Is it a comment on the budget, on their finances, on the tax burden, on the property values? Is that what this is? Could it be that this show is more brilliant than I understand? Well, I guess we'll never know. We will never know. All I can tell you is California, it is cursed. California is cursed. It is a cursed place. People need to get out of there because every time a news story breaks about California, it's not a good story. It's not a happy, feel-good story right now. Wildfires. Tomorrow, shitstorms. Thanks for listening to the Dave Lawler Podcast.